Hi, it's Ed with Free Circle. Hope you're having a good Monday morning. I want to talk a little bit about leadership, what it means to be a leader, and just my opinion on leadership. And it's a big thing, leadership. Leaders are born. I'll tell you, just because some leaders have a job as a leader, I would not necessarily define them as a leader. To me, being a leader, it means a lot. You have a big job. When you are placed in a leadership role, your focus is to maintain leadership role, not a friendship role. And a lot of people, they cannot define the two and they get tangled up. Your purpose of being a leader is to keep your team on task. That is your job as a leader. And when you let friendships and cliques and clubs get into leadership, that's when you fall prey to a lot of vicious attacks from a lot of areas. Being a leader, you cannot let your own bias enter into your decision making. A lot of people, they want to allow their personal bias to dictate what they should actually do for the task at hand. And that can be devastating to the project or the job or whatever you're leading. So, number one rule I always follow is I will never ask anybody to do something that I would not do myself. It's important. If you are going to ask somebody to do a job, you've got to be willing to do the job yourself. That doesn't mean you're able to do the job, but you have to be willing to do the job. That means you're fired. You're out the door, pick up your paycheck on Friday, and you have to maintain and keep order and keep that task moving forward. So before you pull the fire button, you've got to realize you're going to affect the project. You're going to affect the job. So when you have leadership roles, you've got to maintain a certain leadership quality, and that is discernment. To make sure you're making it the less friction, the better when you're doing a job. So you want to make it frictionless. So your job is to make your task as frictionless as possible. You want good team members. You want people that can get along. And you want people to be kind to one another. The most important thing about leadership is inclusion. You have to be able to include everybody in your team. You don't want something less than. Every job within your organization or your goal, your task, every job within it is the most important task, and we've got to remember that. So as we think about leadership, we've got to think about others, and that means to include others, you have to leave your personal bias out, because we're all biased. I'm very biased in lots of ways, but I realize my bias and I can put that aside. When I come to reasoning and getting things done, it takes a person that can set aside. Differences are only overcome by leaders, and true leaders can set aside their bias. They don't disinclude others. They include everybody, because even the lowest man on your totem pole may bring up the saving idea for the project. And that means everything to the project. And when you're a leader, you've got to remember that's your job, to keep the task going forward until it's completed. And if you're unwilling to listen to the low man on the totem pole, you may miss the target that you're trying to reach. So that's important to realize. Do not puff yourselves up in a leadership role. It's not power. A leader is not power. A leader is an improviser. A leader is a motivator. A leader is an organizer. A leader is a listener. So there's a lot of us that try to lead but fail because we put our own bias in the way. In leadership, you have to be able to set aside, and a lot of people cannot do that. So when we're put into these leadership roles, remember, you've got to be able to do as you say. So I would never put somebody in a job that I would not do myself. That does not mean I'm capable of every job. That means that I'm willing to figure it out and get it done. So we have to have leadership that can discern friendship from leadership. A supervisor or a boss is not your friend. He is a task organizer. He keeps the ball rolling. If it's stopped, it's his job to make sure it gets going again in the quickest possible way. So if you're unwilling to listen to the least of these, you may miss your target. So include everybody that's on your team, even the janitor. By golly, if the janitor comes by and you're sitting at your desk and he says, "Hey, Joe, why don't you do that? It would seem to be much easier." Listen to him. It might be much easier. So be willing to accept others' opinions, because they do matter sometimes. And when you want to hit that goal, that target, every bit of input is valuable. So putting aside our differences, our own bias is important. And a lot of people cannot do that. They are in leadership roles, but they do not realize they're not being very good leaders, because a leader sets aside and he puts into a position somebody that can handle it and recognize that. So willingness to listen and the value of having that ability, that is key to leadership. And recognizing we all are a gear in the big machine, and it takes us all to get the job done. So yeah, inclusion is the key. everybody, they have a goal for their life, and we've got to be able to set our life goals aside when we enter into a leadership role. And we've got to remember we're here to get this job done. And a lot of us don't recognize that at times. And it can devastate everything we do. So learning to be a leader is kind of difficult. I myself, I've went to leadership classes, and the value in those classes, what I took away from that, it will always be with me. And the people that taught me the things that I learned, they're valuable. Even though I don't use them all the time, they're there. And I recognize when I see things. So inclusion is everything when you want a good leadership. You want a person that can include and set aside his own reasonings at times. Because if you cannot listen to a good idea and see that it's a good idea, I don't know, are you a good leader? So you've got to be able to take risk at times and know, I trust this person in what he's telling me. And if you can read people well, you can generally see, yeah, this makes sense. So I'm going with it. Not what everything else is telling you. Sometimes a whole room of people will be wrong, and one person in that room will be right. And it's up to that leader to understand, no, this has to go in a different direction. We're going with Sam over here. And everybody has to accept that. That's what we're doing. And be able to make that call. It's important. So leadership is not power. Leadership is giving up power. Leadership is knowing that everybody is valuable in your team, and what you do with your position matters to the end of your target, your goal, your job. So leadership is often turning yourself off and turning others on and letting everybody shine together. So leadership is not power. Leadership is a role of understanding others, realizing where passion is and where things will get stuck if you take a certain direction. Troubleshooting and problem solving. It's not easy at times. And to make that difficult call, it is hard at times. I've been on a production line where it's halted, and it was my job to make the right call to get it back. That sometimes makes you shake. Oh God, so recognizing if you're not capable of doing something, organizing the right people that can, what needs to get done, how do you get it done in the quickest time possible, on budget. Yeah, there's a lot to leadership, but the most important thing of all is having the ability to listen. That's my opinion on leadership. I hope everybody's having a good Monday morning. Ed, Free Circle, out.